You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and it's great to have you with us this week. As always, we're always so glad to be able to talk about building and growing and monetizing your online platform. Just before we started the podcast here, I was talking to our members club, and we're talking about a variety of things that we're dealing with and working on. Our big theme this week, we're going to get to it in a minute, is this idea of talking yourself out of procrastination. But I have two things I want to mention before I even dig into this week's subject. One is to just thank you, those of you that have been listening to the podcast here. I actually earlier today took a look at the podcast on one of the apps that I use, and I noticed that there were several new reviews from listeners. So if you took the time to leave a review for the podcast, thanks for doing that. I really appreciate that. If you've never left a review for the podcast and you listen regularly, I would be elated to see some reviews from those who listen to the show. So if you get the chance to do that and would be willing to, thank you in advance. But to those of you that already did that, thanks so much. And before we get into this week's topic, I want to highlight one of the members of our members club. He's one of the newest members of our members club. He just had a momentous event in his professional life take place, and he unveiled some of this for us just before we began the podcast. Let me introduce my friend to you, Dave Jenkins. Dave, take it away. Tell us what you got going on.
Great, John. Thank you so very much. It's a great honor to do that. I am a first-time author, long time in the process. So this whole thing about procrastination is like, okay, yeah, I've been in that tunnel, but uh, crossed the finish line, and I now have in my hands the new book that I'm releasing, Hello Purpose, a 21-day journal to uncovering your purpose. And what the journal really is all about is helping us. All of us have a purpose. God has created us with a purpose. God has a purpose for us. And purpose is not something that many of us understand how to pursue. We know how to pursue a job, we know how to pursue a loved one, and all those other things, but understanding purpose, and purpose is also seasonal. It changes according to where you are at times. So we go through that. It has biblical outlines, biblical scripture. It has room for really reflection, as well as an opportunity for a third party to come in and help you to get a focus on what's going on. So it's available on Amazon. Hello Purpose. Dave Jenkins is the author. Love for you to take a look at it. John, thanks so very much for this opportunity.
You are welcome, and we congratulate you for getting your first book released. How exciting is that? We're glad to be able to celebrate that with you. So you could find Hello Purpose on Amazon. I'll tell you one other place you'll be able to find it. You're going to be able to find that in the Platform Launchers bookstore. Just go to platformlaunchers.com. You'll see the bookstore tab right at the top of the page, and you could scroll down there, and you'll be able to see Dave Jenkins' new book, Hello Purpose, right on the bookstore. And we're all very proud of him and just grateful to be able to see that content released. Now, this week, I just alluded to this a moment ago, and we were joking a little bit about this before the podcast started, that we're talking about procrastination. And some of us even joked that maybe we ought to just put this off till next week. Maybe we just wait till next week to talk about this. But we're going to talk about it this week. We're not going to procrastinate on the subject. And what I want to talk about is this idea of talking yourself out of procrastination, because we all do it to some degree. We all do it a little bit here or there. And what does it look like to talk ourselves out of it? Now, little background here, just to give some context. I'm a dreamer. Anyone that knows me well knows that I'm a dreamer. Most of the people I work with who actively create message-based online platforms like our members club here, they're dreamers as well. And probably if you're watching us on YouTube, if you're bothering to listen to this content, if you're listening to us on a podcast app of your choice, you might be a dreamer as well. I think it's fun to be a dreamer. I like being a dreamer. And in many respects, I actually think it's beneficial. I don't think that there's anything wrong with being a dreamer. Some of my best and most productive and most creative ideas have come to me while I have been daydreaming. And it wouldn't surprise me to discover that maybe some of you who are listening right now have had the same exact experience. But here's the thing. There can be a downside to our daydreams. And what I mean by that is this. They may seem enjoyable. Our daydreams could be enjoyable. They may seem beneficial, but often they aren't coupled with action. For a daydream to become something that we actually experience in reality, it needs to be coupled with action. And some of our best ideas They never move beyond that dream stage into the stage of actually getting accomplished. And we want to interrupt that. So, how do we move from dream to done? Or maybe I could say, how do we move from creativity to activity, right? We want to interrupt this idea of procrastination because to some extent, the reason these daydreams aren't becoming reality is oftentimes really a procrastination problem. It's not that we don't have the desire to do it, it's just that we're putting it off for some reason. And there's a variety of reasons people put these things off. Maybe one of the reasons for you is maybe you're a perfectionist. And if you're a perfectionist, that may mean that you only want to do something or release something to the public once it's perfect. But then deep down, you know that what you're creating will never truly be perfect. And because of that dilemma, where you find yourself in the middle of those two emotions, you end up delaying releasing it. And you let yourself believe that maybe eventually you're going to get around to perfecting your content and then finally releasing it, but eventually never comes. And it just remains a daydream. It doesn't actually happen. Or maybe it's something different. Maybe you're wrestling with a different problem. Maybe your problem is the problem of being a people pleaser. Well, how does people pleasing connect to this idea of procrastination? Well, if you're a people pleaser, which many of us probably are, you don't want to disappoint others. People pleasers, just by nature, don't want to disappoint other people. So and the way it works out is they oftentimes find themselves saying yes to too many things at once. And I think I even heard shades of that when we were just being transparent in our conversation before the podcast started here, talking to our members club community. I think some of us fall into this category where we agree to do many things at the same time. And as a result, we find ourselves not wanting to disappoint people, but we don't get things done because we're trying to do too much at one time. And when you've got too much going on at one time, that very obviously leads to many things remaining undone because we only have a certain amount of time. Those are a couple causes, right? A couple things that cause procrastination. The truth is procrastination has many root causes. These are just a couple that I commonly see. But if you're personally struggling with procrastination and it's holding you back from actually getting something meaningful done with your online platform, what should you do? How should you remedy this? Like, how should you address this? Is there a way maybe that you could talk yourself out of some of these procrastinating patterns if you notice this as a pattern in your life? I think it's possible. I think it's possible that you could talk yourself out of it. I think it's possible that you could get out of it. And so what I'd like to do is just offer a few suggestions that I personally find helpful. And so I hope you find them helpful as well. And the first suggestion I have for you is this. If you're trying to talk yourself out of this, there's one thing I want you to tell yourself for starters, and that's this. Tell yourself that you're making your life more complicated than it needs to be. So tell yourself that you're making your life more complicated than it needs to be. During the course of your day, how many decisions are you responsible for making? I would assume probably many, because think about the things that you're trying to juggle. You may be trying to juggle the demands of a traditional job. So you've got those demands. You may also at the same time be juggling some of the responsibilities of parenting, or as some of us were conversing about just a few moments ago, some of us are taking care of parents. So either you're parenting children or you're taking care of elderly parents and some of the responsibilities that go with that. Or maybe some of you at the same time you're trying to do all these things, you also have some personal goals that you're trying to just attain, some goals you're trying to reach. Have you ever considered reducing some of the decisions that you're responsible for making on a day-to-day basis, reducing those decisions through automation and elimination? Automation and elimination. Let me explain what I mean by that. We have more tools for automation than ever before. There are all kinds of automation tools that you can use to simplify repeated tasks in particular. And some of these tools, if you're in this world of content creation, like so many of us are, right? If you're trying to develop a message-based online platform, some of these automation tools that exist can actually help you manage your content distribution, particularly scheduling tools. So if and sometimes I'll ask people as they're developing their online platform, what do you put out in real time and what do you schedule? Because scheduling tools can save a lot of time and it reduces the amount of decisions that you have to make on a day-to-day basis. I know that there are other tools that we use for automation. Maybe some of you use these. I certainly use them. Tools that take care of simple tasks like paying bills or sending reminders or things like that. I use that all the time, right? There are a lot of my bills that I just have auto pay so I don't have to think about it. I even do this. There's a financial book that came out some years ago called The Automatic Millionaire. And the premise of the book is to just automate your investing, to make it so that you don't have to think about investing. You just automate it through withdrawals and things like that coming out of your accounts, going into certain things at set times. I took that counsel to heart. And so I've automated some of my investing. And it's great because I have small amounts come out at different times and small amounts become big amounts because they're automated. They're things I'm not forgetting to do. They go into pockets where I want them to grow. And it's kind of a neat thing. And I look at some of the other things we're doing. If we can automate our investing, and if we could automate our bill paying, right? My electric bill, it's paid automatically every month. Other bills paid automatically every month. If we could automate those things, why are we not taking advantage of some of the automation tools that allow us to distribute our message, things related to our online platforms? Why aren't we using some of these things? And while you're automating, you might as well do some eliminating as well, because those concepts actually go hand in hand. I suspect that there are several things on either your daily routine or your weekly schedule that you've been doing for a long time, and you've been treating these things like they are critical, even though it may not really actually matter if they get done at all. And if they do need to get done, is it always necessary for you to be the one doing them? Could it be that there might be maybe a certain things that you've been holding on to out of a desire for control that really should be entrusted to somebody else? So if you can automate things that need to be done on a regular basis that are either content distribution things or scheduling tasks that could simply be automated just through programs that might be built into the software that you use to manage your online platform, that can help you also eliminate things from your list that don't really belong on your list anymore. And it might even help you point out some of those things that you can entrust to somebody else if there's not an automation tool. But I think automation and elimination go hand in hand. So the first question was tell yourself that you're, or the first, I guess, like, advice that you'd be giving yourself as you're trying to advise yourself here is tell yourself that you're making your life more complicated than it needs to be. Your life actually could be a little bit more simple. All right, number 2 on my list. This one's a short one, but this is one of my favorite things to do. And I probably do this to some degree almost every day of the week. But number 2 is tell yourself that you're doing a favor for future you. For future you, right? One of my favorite things to do is to make future me happy. So I often say things, my wife thinks it's funny when I do this, but I often say things like, if I do this now, future me is going to be very grateful. And so I find myself doing that with regularity. But essentially, what I'm trying to do as, I'm trying to do some of this like things that are a favor for future me. Essentially, I'm trying to turn productivity into a game by treating the concept of working ahead like something I get to do to reward myself, not something that I have to do like an obligation. So tell yourself, if we're going to talk ourselves out of procrastination here, tell yourself that you're doing a favor for future you. All right, number 3 on my list, tell yourself that you don't have to get everything done, just the next thing. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I find it helpful to make lists. And if you're a list making person and you're watching us on YouTube, if you're a list making person, you're listening to us on the podcast, you're my kind of person. I am a list maker. I love making lists. Lists help me prioritize my daily activities. I keep a general list for most days of the week since my schedule doesn't really change drastically week to week. So I keep a list of my Monday tasks, my Tuesday tasks, et cetera, et cetera. And as I'm working through the list, what I do is, and this has been a discipline that I had to learn over time because I didn't used to do this, but what I do at this point now is I'm working through that list is I mentally block out everything except the next thing I have to do. I don't let myself think about all the other things. I just focus on the next thing I have to do, and I block everything else out. I don't even allow myself to think about it. So I don't let myself worry about whatever is number 4 on the list when I'm still working on number 1. The goal is just work on number 1. And when you're done with number 1, you don't even have to think about that anymore. Now that's off the list for the day, and you could work on number 2. And then you work on number 2, work on number 3, number 4, whatever you've got on the list. But don't worry about the one coming up. Only focus on the one that you're on. And when I treat my list like something that I can gradually get accomplished a piece at a time like that, it actually happens. It actually gets done one step at a time. It makes the process of working through it much more enjoyable and much less stressful. I very much enjoy doing that. And at the end of the day, I have a sense of accomplishment because I'll look at that list at the end of the day. I'll kind of recap it and look at it and say, you know what? I got it done. I got number 1 done, got number 2 done, got it all done, right? All right, number 4 on the list. Some of you are going to love this one. Number 4 on the list, if we're talking ourselves out of things, number 4 is this. Tell yourself that it's okay to declare an amnesty. Now, what do I mean by this? Tell yourself it's okay to declare an amnesty. Well, what I'm saying is be gracious to yourself and offer yourself complete forgiveness from whatever projects are remaining undone. You probably got something, right? Tell yourself that you have complete forgiveness, a complete amnesty from whatever has remained undone, because maybe that will help you gain some much needed clarity about whether or not to restart the project or step away from it entirely. And I'll give you an example. I still remember the clarity I received when I took my family on a vacation several years ago. It was actually, I don't know, plenty of years ago when this moment happened. But at the same time, I still remember the clarity I got on this one particular vacation. I'd been juggling multiple projects, but the vacation forced me to pause them. I was on vacation. I wasn't supposed to be juggling all these projects. It was a time to be away from those things. And I remember in the midst of that pause, it became very clear to me that I should not resume one of the projects when I returned from our trip. That was not something that I should be doing, that I should not resume the project when I returned from the trip. And I remember keeping to that pledge, keeping to that decision. And it was a very good decision to not return to that project when I returned from the trip. I needed a break from thinking about that for a little while to get that kind of clarity. So it was almost like an amnesty, a moment where I gave myself just complete forgiveness, where I said, all right, you know what? For this vacation week, I'm not going to think about this. I'm not going to focus on this. And it actually allowed me to have clarity whether or not, when the vacation was over, I should resume the project or whether I should actually pause the project or just take a break from it completely. And I wonder if maybe in your case, maybe an amnesty will actually help you gain some clarity about some of the projects that you've been working on that you often find yourself procrastinating to finish. Maybe you just need a pause to actually decide whether it's worth finishing at all. And if it's not worth finishing, that's fine. Take a break. You're forgiven. If it is worth finishing, maybe the pause will kind of rekindle that desire within you to get back to it. So let me recap these ideas here. There's just 4 of them that I'm suggesting for us this week. Number 1, if you're trying to talk yourself out of procrastination, number 1, tell yourself that you're making your life more complicated than it needs to be. Number 2 is this idea of telling yourself that you're doing a favor for future you. Future you is going to be really happy if you do whatever this task is right now. Number 3 is tell yourself you don't have to get everything done, just the next thing. That's the only thing you have to get done, the next thing. Not everything else, just the next thing. And number 4 is tell yourself it's actually okay to declare an amnesty, where you just give yourself forgiveness, maybe even take a pause from what you're doing because it's time for you to recalibrate, rethink whether or not it's worth doing it all. I truly hope these suggestions help. These are things that I use that have genuinely helped me. I hope they help you. I think they do help me for sure combat procrastination, because here's the thing. Procrastination can be a real pain. It's a reality. All of us deal with it to one degree or another. And maybe one of these ideas will help you talk yourself out of procrastinating from something that you've been currently working on. And maybe if you feel like you're in a loop of procrastination, maybe this is one of those things that you could look at and say, this might help interrupt that loop. I hope something there is helpful for you. Again, thank you for just being part of our listening audience each week. We're super grateful that you're there. I check the stats from time to time, and I notice that there are more of you as of late. It's been fun to watch the show grow, and very excited from those of you that reach out and send us a message and let us know that you're listening. That's really fun as well. Thanks again to those of you that left reviews. I appreciate it all. If you ever want to send me an email, shoot me an email at john@platformlaunchers.com. I'd love to hear from you. And again, you could stop by platformlaunchers.com for a whole bunch of resources. We've got our bookstore there. We're just adding the new book from Dave Jenkins, and we hope you take a look at that as well. But that's it for us this week. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to talking to you very soon. And in the meantime, we hope you have an awesome week. Take care.